In a world where voices are often silenced before they're even heard, one man walked onto a stage expecting a fair chance to share his vision. He wasn't just another guest. He was a Black entrepreneur who had fought his way through every barrier society placed in front of him – poverty, prejudice, and doubt. Yet as he sat under the blinding lights of a national TV show, the battle he thought he left behind reappeared in its most humiliating form. The host's smile carried an edge sharper than any question. Each word she spoke wasn't meant to understand him. It was meant to break him. The audience laughed when they should have listened, and cameras rolled as if his dignity was a script written for entertainment. But what happened next was something no one in that studio expected. Instead of crumbling, instead of retreating, this man stood tall with words so powerful they shattered the silence of racism right on live television. What did he say that left the host speechless and millions stunned? And why does his story still echo louder than the show that tried to silence him? Stay with me, because this moment changed everything. Before the blinding lights of television and the weight of an entire nation's gaze, his life was defined by quiet determination. Born in a small neighborhood where opportunities were scarce and doubt was constant, he grew up knowing that every step forward would have to be earned. His mother worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table, while he spent late nights studying by the dim glow of a second-hand lamp. Books became his escape, education his weapon, and persistence his only ally. As he grew older, his vision sharpened. He wasn't just building a business, he was building a statement. His company wasn't about wealth or fame, it was about proving that talent, creativity, and grit could rise from places society had written off. Clients admired his work, communities respected his journey, and slowly his voice began to matter. Yet with every milestone, whispers followed him. Some said he was lucky. Others doubted he truly belonged in boardrooms filled with people who didn't look like him. Still, he pressed on, believing that success would eventually silence prejudice. So when a popular television network invited him for an interview, he saw it as a chance to inspire millions watching at home. But what he didn't know was that beneath the polished smiles and scripted questions, another battle waited, one that wouldn't test his business skills, but his very dignity. The stage was set, not for recognition, but for confrontation. The studio lights blazed hotter than expected, but the real heat came from the pointed questions hurled his way. At first, the host's tone carried a veneer of politeness, the kind that sounds friendly until you realize every word is sharpened to cut. She leaned forward, her smile tight, and asked questions that seemed less about his business and more about his right to exist in that chair. "How did someone like you manage to get here?" she asked, her voice dripping with disbelief. The audience chuckled, not because it was funny, but because they were guided to laugh. The cameras zoomed in, capturing his composed expression, as if waiting for him to break. He tried to answer with dignity, speaking about his company, his vision, and his community. But each time he began to rise, she interrupted. She questioned his credibility, dismissed his achievements, and twisted his story into a spectacle. The applause signs lit up on cue, encouraging the crowd to laugh at his expense. It wasn't just an interview anymore. It was a public trial, staged for entertainment. Every pause, every sigh from the host carried the weight of a society that had doubted him since childhood. And as millions watched, the message was clear. He wasn't meant to be respected. He was meant to be ridiculed. His chest tightened, but his eyes never wavered. Years of battling prejudice had taught him one thing: silence in the face of injustice only feeds it.
The studio audience leaned in, sensing something was about to change. The host prepared another question, one meant to humiliate him further, to push him beyond his breaking point. But this time, he didn't wait for her to finish. He sat forward, his voice steady, yet burning with power. And in that moment, when the entire room expected him to crumble, he began to speak words that would silence the laughter, shake the audience, and echo far beyond the studio walls. What he said next wasn't just an answer. It was a reckoning.
The studio had grown unusually still. The laughter that once filled the air now lingered awkwardly, as if the audience sensed they had become part of something far darker than a talk show. The host smirked, ready to press her next question, a line crafted not for clarity, but for cruelty. She wanted a stumble, a hesitation, something she could twist into a headline. But instead, he leaned forward, eyes locked on hers, voice steady yet pulsing with a quiet fire. "You see," he began, "when you ask me how I got here, you're not asking about my business. You're asking if someone like me belongs in this chair at all." The crowd shifted uneasily. His words cut through the scripted cheer like a blade through silence. Cameras zoomed in, capturing the determination etched across his face. He wasn't flinching, and for the first time, the host's confident posture faltered. He continued, each sentence building like thunder rolling closer. He spoke of growing up in a world where doors were slammed shut before he could even reach them. He spoke of being underestimated in classrooms, overlooked in boardrooms, and doubted at every stage of his journey. He spoke for every person who had been told they were too different, too unworthy, too invisible to dream. And then, with the weight of a nation's wounds pressing against him, he turned to the audience. His voice rose, no longer steady, but unshakable. "You laugh because you've been taught to see me as entertainment. You doubt me because you've been told my success must be luck. But what you forget is that I stand here, not in spite of the barriers, but because I refuse to be crushed by them. And I will not let this moment or anyone on this stage take that away." The host shifted in her chair, her notes trembling slightly in her hands. For the first time, she had no interruption ready, no mocking line prepared. The control she had wielded so easily had slipped, replaced by a silence that burned hotter than any spotlight. The audience, once laughing on cue, now sat frozen. Some lowered their eyes, others leaned forward, captivated, shaken. His words weren't just directed at the host, they were aimed at a system, at a history, at every hidden prejudice that had made this spectacle possible. And then came the line that no scriptwriter could have predicted. "If my presence on this stage offends you, then maybe it's not me who doesn't belong here. Maybe it's the racism you've carried into this room." The silence was deafening. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every second of the stunned stillness. The host opened her mouth, searching for a reply, but nothing came. And in that breathless moment, America wasn't laughing anymore.
The studio sat in silence. The cameras still rolled, but the atmosphere had shifted completely. Just moments earlier, laughter echoed as if mocking his very existence. Now the same audience sat frozen, their faces reflecting something they hadn't expected to feel: shame, admiration, reflection. What had begun as a performance meant to belittle him had transformed into something raw, undeniable, and unforgettable. The host shifted uncomfortably, her earlier smirk gone, replaced with the nervous smile of someone who had lost control of the script. For the first time, she couldn't hide behind rehearsed questions or audience cues. Her silence spoke louder than anything she could have said. And in that silence, The man on stage didn't just reclaim his dignity, he reshaped the entire conversation. When the cameras finally cut to commercial, the studio staff scrambled. But the audience erupted, not with laughter this time, but with applause. It wasn't unanimous. Some clapped hesitantly, others rose to their feet, while a few sat with folded arms, unwilling to acknowledge the truth they had just witnessed. But the applause grew louder, wave after wave, until it drowned out every trace of mockery that had filled the room before. For him, the moment wasn't about victory over a TV host. It wasn't about going viral or trending online. It was about standing in a space that wasn't designed for him and refusing to bow. He had walked in as a guest expected to entertain. He left as a voice that demanded to be heard. That kind of power isn't scripted. It's earned through years of surviving the weight of prejudice. And beyond the studio walls, the ripple began. Clips spread across social media within hours, millions replaying the moment where one man's courage silenced not just a host, but a narrative that had persisted for generations. Young Black entrepreneurs watched and felt seen. Parents replayed his words to their children as proof that resilience is stronger than ridicule. And those who had never thought about the subtle cruelty woven into entertainment were forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. Racism doesn't always appear as violence in the streets. It often hides in plain sight, masked as humor, framed as curiosity, dressed up as journalism. But here's what makes this moment unforgettable. It wasn't just about him. His story became a mirror, reflecting the experiences of countless others who had been underestimated, mocked, or silenced simply because of who they were. His courage turned a staged humiliation into a national reckoning. But the deeper question lingers. Why did it take a viral moment to wake people up? Why does society wait until dignity is stripped away on live television before recognizing the everyday racism that quietly destroys dreams one small cut at a time? The truth is uncomfortable, but necessary. Racism thrives not just in overt acts of hatred, but in laughter at the wrong time, in silence when someone is mocked, in applause when cruelty is disguised as entertainment. Every bystander who watches and does nothing keeps the cycle alive. His story forces us to ask ourselves, when the next moment comes, whether in a classroom, a workplace, or a television studio, will we laugh along, stay silent, or finally speak out? Because in the end, this isn't just his story, it's ours. It's a reminder that dignity cannot be handed to us by others. It must be claimed, defended, and protected. And maybe the real question we should all leave with is this. If one man's voice could silence a room filled with prejudice, imagine what could happen if millions chose to raise theirs.